Hello friends, I wanted to make a video on coronavirus situation in India. We all know the tragedy that's currently going on in India. The second wave is hitting really hard and it's ravaging Indian towns. Tens of thousands are dying every week. The situation is really bad. Naturally, there is a lot of debate going on everywhere. A great deal of news coverage on mainstream and social media are putting all the blame on politicians, especially ruling party and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Look, I'm not here to defend or justify any politician or political party. They deserve a lot of criticism. At the same time, I think it would be totally dishonest to put all the blame on political class. I feel like there is more to this story. That's what I want to talk about in this video. We need to be rational here and look at things leading up to the second wave. We have to ask very hard questions and hold everyone to the same standards. We are doomed to repeat the same mistakes if we don't look at the real root causes and learn lessons. Remember, our political leaders, they didn't fall from sky. They're not aliens. They all came from within our community. They are part of our society. They could be your relatives, your family members, your friends, or friends' friends, or neighbors. Sad truth is, the political leaders in a democracy like India reflect the culture we all collectively represent as a society. We get the leaders we deserve. This video is just an honest effort to go past our natural tendency to blame the government for everything. We also need to look at some of the events and attitudes leading up to this crisis, analyze them, and reflect on them. Okay, let's start with first round of lockdown and the reaction. When Indian state declared lockdown in March 2020, there was a widespread criticism in media and other circles calling it draconian, anti-poor, anti-working class, so on and so forth. You can go back and see what some of these reporters and journalists were saying back then. It was non-stop coverage on unemployment, lack of food supplies, migrant labor, police brutality. The list goes on. You remember, right? Modi's government took a lot of heat for this. Poverty may kill us first, wrote Barkadat on Washington Post right after the first lockdown was declared. One of the industrialists complained about flattening profits due to lockdown. Another reporter, known for her anti-Modi sentiments, Rana Ayub, wrote on Twitter, "In a week, there will be no food. My children and wife will die by staying home," she wrote, citing a daily wage worker on a different platform. So you get the gist of what was going on, what these reporters were doing. They were blaming Indian government, especially Modi, for everything. No matter what he did, he was wrong. Everything was his fault. In other words, some of these reporters were weaponizing natural crisis to score political points. I'm pointing all this because this created a stigma around lockdown and strict policies to flatten the curve. In a society like India, where generally people don't follow any rules on their own, it was impossible to control the crowd and infection rate in the absence of a strict lockdown. Both central and state governments didn't want to be seen as anti-poor, anti-working class in the eyes of public. This started building pressure on governments to open up the economy and return to business as usual. The best example of this mindset is farmers' protest that started around August 2020. By August, September of 2020, the farmers' protests were taking place in Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, and Uttar Pradesh area. Large gatherings were taking place on daily basis. Mind you, this was right in the middle of a global pandemic. By end of November, hundreds of thousands of farmers were participating in blocking highway and marching towards national capital of Delhi. Ironically, the same reporters, the same journalists, and international media, they were supporting these protests with a total disregard for safety of these people. There was no social distancing in these crowds. There were hardly any masks. In fact, the same journalists were very sympathetic and actively supporting these protests with their opinion pieces on international publications. Again, the focus was to blame Modi and his party. Any attempt, any attempt to stop large gatherings in the midst of global pandemic would have made him a villain in the eyes of these politically motivated media outlets. Even international celebrities like Rihanna and Greta Thunberg were throwing their weight behind these farmers' protests and supporting these massive rallies in the middle of a pandemic. This was complete madness by their own standards. By December, Indian population was in a different mindset. Any talks of social distancing, mask wearing were seen as unnecessary thing. In fact, the relaxed attitude had turned into reckless behavior in the form of massive religious festivals, gatherings, and election campaigns. People were getting impatient and ready to get back to business as usual. Here is a news clip on movie theaters getting vandalized by fans over cancelled shows. And this is from April of 2021. The Kumbh Mela was just another disaster as people from all religious groups got back to their religious celebrations by early 2021. By January 2021, Indian government was getting ready to roll out one of the biggest vaccination pro campaigns in the history. Once again, it was very important to revisit this time frame and understand people's mindset by this time. There was a widespread misinformation on vaccines by then. One of the politicians from opposite party openly questioned the authenticity of vaccine by calling it BJP vaccine and told his supporters that he would not be getting vaccinated. Here is a report from BBC in January 2021. There were already efforts by opposition parties and certain religious leaders to undermine the vaccine campaign based on conspiracy theories. For example, one politician said the vaccine will make you impotent. Then there are rumors around vaccines containing pork. One of the Islamic scholars was telling his followers how the vaccine had a secret microchips. This misinformation, coupled with complacency amongst Indian population, was taking a toll on vaccine rollout. This is from Guardian back in late January 2021. It says Indian hesitancy sets back world's biggest vaccine drive. It goes on to say that the turnout ratio was as low as 22%. Plenty of shots, but a few takers, reads another report from Bloomberg. 60% polled Indians still hesitant towards COVID vaccine. This one from India Today. What all these show is the mindset of Indian society and international media back in the first quarter of 2021. There was a relaxed attitude and things were back to business as usual. Any discussion or focus on social distancing, mask wearing were seen as an unnecessary distraction. In fact, many people and opposition parties had already concluded that The strict lockdown in 2020 was unnecessary and it did more harm than good. Under these circumstances, it would have been extremely difficult to convince the society on the dangers of second wave and push for precautions. There was a widespread opposition to any lockdown or strict measures. Even the experts were declaring that the lockdown were unnecessary. BBC and some sections of media were already accusing Modi of not consulting state governments before imposing the lockdown. This put central government on a back foot, and nobody wanted to impose strict restrictions in place to control the infection. Look, I can keep going on and on. All I'm trying to do is to see things from a historical perspective and understand how one thing led to another, resulting in the current nightmare. Does the ruling government hold any responsibility for this crisis? Of course they do. Is Modi guilty of missteps? Of course he is. At the same time, if you're putting all the blame on one person or one party, you are also part of the problem. We cannot get into this habit of blaming everything on ruling government as if they are some aliens who came from outside. We cannot forget the role of our own attitudes, opposition parties, political rivalry, and the role of questionable journalists and how they all contributed to making things worse. We all have to step up and take the responsibility for our own action. Only then, only then can hopefully change things for better in future. All right, guys, that's all for now. Take care and stay safe.